Hi everyone, Patricia Worby, Alchemy Therapies here. Good morning from another bright and sunny but very chilly morning here in the UK. And today I just want to do a little more on the idea of spiritual bypass. There is a first video in this, which I will link in here. Just to remind you what I covered in that first one, I talked about what spiritual bypass is. It's a lack of connection to your body. It's a sense that you can live in the spiritual realm, and you often find groups and other people who help support that, which may initially distract you from the issues that you have within your own psyche, but they don't actually help you resolve them. And in fact, you can find a lot of disconnect, you can find a lot of abuse and self-abuse in those communities. So what I want to just carry on with here is this idea then that the wounds that we carry psychologically tend to come from childhood. For most people, childhood is a very, very important time for our own understanding of who we are. Our brains are immature. Up to the age of 7, in fact, they're still forming, 7 till 25, 26 for the cortex, actually. So our brains are responding to the environment around us. Now, back in times when we lived in extended family groups or a tribe or a village, even going back, 150 years or so before the Industrial Revolution, we would have had many people raising each child. It wouldn't have just been 1 or 2 parents. And so what we're finding now, particularly in the times we're in, where everybody's very stressed and there's such competition for resources and for stimulating activities, we all have to be driving children around doing things. There's very little time to stop and reflect. And what we find with children is this lack of emotional attachment to a stable, unstressed parent or 2 or 3 or 4. Is causing children to be perpetually in anxiety, and we're seeing that coming through now in schools and colleges. Children being raised in this insecure attachment style, as it's called, present with greater self-hatred, disembodiment, lack of grounding, chronic insecurity and anxiety, overactive, busy minds, a lack of basic trust in themselves as much as others, and a deep sense of inner deficiency, which manifests in many, many ways. The overconsumption of goods, the need for continual flattering and attention from others, and a disconnect from the world, from the natural world in particular. Now, that may sound very depressing. I would like to stress that this is not a negative story. There are things you can do, and one of the things that is needed really is to do the full embodied psychological work. That can be achieved by meditation and mindfulness practices, but it is very difficult with relational trauma. And the reason is, you haven't formed a good baseline sense of self. So when a parent supports you and is attuned with you and nurtures your insecurities in a way that helps you feel safe, you're building your foundation of self, brick by brick. But what happens with relational trauma is that foundation is missing. And so if you ask somebody to go to a still place within, actually that is perceived as a threat by the body. And if you look at Polyvagal Theory, which is a very, very useful new theory that has been developed by Stephen Porges, you'll see that stillness and inactivity in a traumatized brain are not perceived as relaxing. They are perceived as immobilization with threat, which is basically the same as preparation for death. And so many, many people will find meditative practices and stillness to be very, very threatening and difficult. And certainly that was the case with me when a friend of mine first suggested meditation, I remember about 20 years ago, and I had to be still for 20 minutes. It was the most excruciating 20 minutes. I had never been still in my entire life, and it just felt like time stretched out. I didn't find it particularly relaxing, and I certainly didn't notice any improvement. And I think I mentally made the note, I'm not going to do that again. So meditation didn't really work for me. That's not to say it doesn't work for many people. But I think the deeper work is to actually connect with bodies and your bodily experience and your feelings. And that means really connecting with all of your unwanted, unacceptable shadow side, as it's sometimes called, the thoughts, feelings, and memories, etc., that we would normally wish to avoid, bury, judge, defend against, or deny. Now, trauma is different for everyone, but it's basically, the definition of trauma is anything that overwhelms our capacity to cope. And so for a sensitized, poorly attuned child with insecure attachment, that can be anything. It can be the loss of somebody close to them. It can be being told off by a teacher. It can be having a school friend reject you or criticize you. Humiliation, betrayal, abandonment are the three biggest ones, really. But it's variable, and little things can be cumulative and very significant for sensitized individuals. Trauma, therefore, can be the little things. It doesn't have to be massive things like what we're going through at the moment with our virus pandemic. It can be, as I've said, these little childhood wounds that get stored in the limbic brain and therefore situated in our nervous system. And unlike normal memory, memory of, I don't know, your 7th birthday or the first car you ever got, there is no narrative, there's no story, it's just feeling based, and it's stuck. It does not move, it does not change, it's there to continually trigger you in your adult life. So when the boss criticizes you at work, your brain goes back to the last time you felt that way, which may have been, you know, some humiliation in childhood. But it doesn't come up as a proper memory. You don't see yourself and what happened, you just have the feeling of it. And these feelings, therefore, are very overwhelming, and you're completely re-traumatized every time that happens. So hence, a lot of anxiety in the world right now is because a lot of us don't have this stable base. So doing nothing really is not an option if we want to carry on growing and being more aware and helping each other, because trauma does not disappear on its own. Time does not heal trauma. And that's something we're really noticing with, obviously, veterans coming back from war situations. And it must be said, nurses and doctors who have had to treat really serious cases, which is happening at the moment. So there's going to be a lot more trauma in the coming weeks and months. As I mentioned in my first video, we've had examples of people that have been traumatized from 20, 30, 40, 50 years who have not lost that trauma. It's still present in their system. So let's look at some of the ways that we try and avoid dealing with this, okay? Particularly in the guise of spiritual bypassing. So conflict avoidance in the guise of being easygoing. Now, this definitely rings a bell with me. Okay, so this is one I've used. Leads to repressed anger, of course, because you can't express that because you're easygoing. You make excuses for others' behaviour. You do not acknowledge that others are being negligible or even hurtful, so you don't tell them, or other people. You don't value your own experience of being hurt or disappointed. You tend to negate that and bury it. And actually that isn't helpful for others who are negligible, because if you don't say anything, you don't mirror reality back to them, and they never learn to do things differently. And if you're in a relationship with this person, you really are stuck. So how you do this then is you're using patience and tolerance. We all know of examples of people like that, you know, to bypass your human hurt or anger. So remember in the first video I talked about absolute truth and relative human truth, and you're using absolute truth. You know, I'm a spiritual person. I don't criticize others, to bypass the fact that you actually feel hurt. or angry. Second way of avoiding codependence in the guise of compassion, and this is really a bit of a development of the first one. So you help or care for others out of fear, guilt, shame, or obligation. You focus on others to the exclusion of your own needs and self. So you will do anything for anybody else, but you don't take time out for yourself. And you have a passive communication style. Again, hand up here, this is me, or was. By focusing on the other, I secretly hope you'll focus on me. So notice me for what I'm doing for you. But I won't ever say anything because that would draw attention, and I don't want to draw attention. I want you just to notice. This is also common in interpersonal relationships. Men and women often have this, the woman tending to be more passive in some cases. Without being gender normative, it can vary, but tends to be women. You're using concepts of selflessness and compassion to bypass your own human need. And caring for others because you want to feel good about yourself, which is a good thing. But if underneath you actually think you're bad at a deep fundamental level, you will never be satisfied. You will never have given enough, because there is a bottomless well where there should be this beautiful foundation. So here's one very specific to spiritual communities. And who's your daddy? Okay, acting out with the guru. So gurus, we see them everywhere. They tend to be male. I'm sure there are female gurus, but they tend to be male. And followers tend to be female. But here's what happens. So you please the guru to feel special, validated, important, and loved. But there are competitive feelings with other members of the group who are also trying to please the guru. So there's a bit of competition going on as well. And you're recreating your childhood dynamics in the group to gain love or act out aggression. I've seen this in yoga groups, for instance, and some Buddhist groups. You think the guru has something to give that you don't already have. So you're always going to be chasing that feeling. And instead of the guru teaching you, there's a parable in the Bible, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for life. They're not feeding you for life. They're not teaching you how to feed yourself. They are keeping you dependent on their teachings. And if that is happening, that is a very dangerous relationship. The fourth one, detachment as a suppression of need for love, connection, and desire. So instead of acknowledging your own human needs, you end up avoiding love, intimacy, and relationships because you think that detachment of earthly needs is more important, and it makes you somehow more spiritually aware. And that can come about because you've had the pain of disappointments and failed relationships, and you move towards something that feels less traumatizing, less difficult for you. But you can become then emotionally detached, hollow, unempathic, a bit aloof and self-centered to some people. And at its worst case, you become uninterested in life. You lose your passion for things because the teaching of desire is taught as the root of all attachment, and that's designed to be non-spiritual in some of these teachings. It's said to be the root of all evil, if you like. So they teach that unhealthy desire, devoid of understanding, is the root of suffering, which has relevance. This desire, for instance, for continual consumption, without the understanding that it is destroying our earth, gives us suffering, and it creates suffering for the world. So it's not untrue. But in the nature of interpersonal relationships, desire is key. Desire for connection, for love, for fulfillment is part of the human experience. And being seen as needy, for instance, is death in some of these cultures. And so you are trained to not have any needs, which of course dehumanizes you. Avoidance of attachment to others then, which is kind of implied, is not true freedom. It's still a form of clinging, because an avoidance of anything is within the frame of what you're avoiding. So if I say, don't think about pink elephants, immediately your brain goes to pink elephants. If I say, I don't want you to think about your last relationship, immediately you will think about that. You can't avoid something by practicing detachment. Really, it's resolution that is the key to letting go of anything, and that's about processing something through. So clinging to denial of your human attachment needs is not the way through. It's acceptance of your humanity and your need for others. Now, I have done other talks on attachment styles, so I won't go into this too much, but human attachment as a child runs roughly one of 4 different ways. And there is an insecure attachment style called avoidant, where children whose parents are consistently unavailable emotionally learn this, right? They better not keep trying, because they don't get the required result, which is the connection. So children learn to take care of themselves and not need anything from others. So you may know people like this, or you may be an avoidant yourself. And that's an adaptive strategy, and it works in childhood. It's intelligent and it's useful for when you do not have choices about who you are being cared for by. However, when they grow up, people like this can become very detached, very impersonal. They can be very hard on themselves, and they can be dismissive of their own needs, which leads to overworking. It leads to chronic disease, in fact, if that is not addressed. Number 5 is the spiritual superego. So this is the tyranny of the shoulds. I shouldn't do this. And I remember going through this myself in my sort of late teens, early 20s, things that I shouldn't do in order to be good and more spiritual. So a strict or blind adherence to the doctrines or protocols of any particular movement. It doesn't have to be a spiritual movement. It could be a political movement, a vegan movement. There are so many different options out there for something that you would blindly adhere to. Perfection is the standard for your aspiration, but of course you can't ever approach perfection, so it's a never-ending goal. And we always fall short and feel inadequate. We use renunciation as a justification for self-denial. So it's called emotional anorexia, in other words. We will not attach, we will not feel stuff, we will rise above. We encourage pain and harsh discipline because this is seen as necessary, the self-mortification, if you like, of the flesh, in order for us to rise to this spiritual height. So it's a form of masochism, basically, or even self-abuse. You don't listen to your body in yoga, for instance. I've been in yoga groups where people are encouraged to push themselves beyond their own bodies. Now, of course, in any form of growth, it's the edge that you approach. It's the part beyond which you need to move to grow, but to overdo that consistently and not listen and not be loving to the self ends up actually you damage yourself, which is what I did. But of course, then you blame yourself and not the teaching or the teacher, because you're always pushing anyway. You see it as your problem. You're denying the reality that the group is actually the issue and your relationship with the group. And you, of course, don't have any self-love. And so you've lost, again, connection with yourself. You're looking for some imagined, perfected construct or mental image of perfection. Number 6, using absolute truth to deny the relative truth. So you kind of empty yourself out in order to not pay attention to the conventional. So nothing conventional becomes part of your radar. You're not looking at that. You're outside of the world. And your self-concept is that there is no such thing as myself, and I therefore shouldn't pay undue attention to it. In particular, my feelings. Desire becomes the problem, so I just get rid of any desires that I might have. I have feelings, so I just observe them and let them go. Well, some feelings can't be let go, particularly traumatic feelings, and they will keep rising up until you address them. If feelings are a message from your body that something is important and you need to pay attention to it, and if you continually suppress it, if that's what letting go means to you, you cannot really process it through, and that's what you need to do. You have to process through an emotion or a feeling in order to come out the other side. And you miss that opportunity if you continually suppress and deny. Overcompensatory identity. So if you feel inadequate in your ordinary life, then you're going to work more and harder towards being a perfect practitioner in your spiritual life. And this leads to incredible pushiness and drive and eventually sickness, actually. And I've seen this in movements like a few years ago, juicing was a very big thing, and going on retreats and being amongst people who weren't psychologically or spiritually healthy, and being taught by these people to follow this kind of denial, and when bodies are telling you, I need sugar or I need something to help me through this process, being denied that as you shouldn't need that, therefore you must deny and suppress it. So we're using a spiritual practice to suppress these unwanted feelings of inadequacy or unlovability, in fact. But it's masqueraded in a spiritual persona, and you'll recognize that in probably situations you've been in, perhaps. Number 8, the final one, the spiritual that feeds our narcissism. Narcissism is the stage that all children go through, where everything is about me, but some people don't grow out of that. They get stuck in a narcissistic personality tendency. So here's the belief system then. Gaining experience or insight inflates the sense of self as important or better than others. We're here to grow, we're here to live, we're here to experience. By not having those things and not acknowledging them doesn't make us more spiritual, it makes us disconnected and disembodied. By contrast then, if that's your belief system, then you're going to pity others for being too connected, too worldly, too concerned with the nature of the world. And so we have a closeted narcissism, as opposed to the inflated or grandiose type that is much more overt. So you're not going around saying, look at me, I'm wonderful, but that is what you're emanating. We're very self-absorbed, very preoccupied about our failures, or deficits. And so we're sort of, a closeted sense of self, but still emanating that somehow I'm trying to achieve perfection. And this is common in depressed individuals, and is really a definition of depression. So a lot of depressed people they're not overt about themselves, but their focus is totally on what's wrong with them. We have had obviously a lot of scandals and disasters through some of the groups that have had this narcissistic guru leading them, where they've been encouraged to commit mass suicide or mass murder, this is the extreme end of it, where this self-inflation, denial, I'm great, but I'm not gonna sort of talk about it, you're just gonna feel that from me. And it causes widespread dysfunction and pain. But it's also going on a long-term, much more hidden way as well. In, as I say, some of the movements that we're seeing spring up, animal rights, veganism, yoga, things that seem innocuous. You just need to watch for what's going on under the surface. So just to sum up then, the cost of not considering how we're hiding out in our spiritual practices can be great. So you may You may distract yourself for many years and then wake up at some point and realize that your issues are still not solved. And you may feel then you've wasted time. We need to get closer to our suffering in order to understand it, not to disembody it or distract ourselves from it. And there are methods and tools which you can use to do that. And many people have different methods. I use 3 or 4 that I think work really, really well. There is no transcendence without transformation. You can't transcend anything by ignoring it. You have to actually engage and process. So you have to go through it, not over it, not under it, and not around it. Mindfulness can be used for psychological growth, but I believe psychotherapy is another important tool that many people avoid because they feel it's going to be painful and difficult. There is no transformation without some suffering, but it doesn't have to be difficult. It can be incredibly supportive and should be. And you should feel like you're held for the first time. That's true psychological transformation. So mindfulness can help. I'm not disparaging mindfulness, but I think it needs to be supported and not a lone project for those of us who've had emotional trauma. And offering a supportive environment is key to any transformation. Within that frame, if you have a good therapist, you can form new positive neural circuitry. So you can actually rewire your brain to start feeling good about yourself as a default rather than bad. And you can start to rehabilitate yourself and feel connected for the first time in many, many years. To relearn the things you learnt wrongly in childhood, the messages you downloaded unconsciously that are not helpful. And you can work closely and honestly with your practitioner or with someone else to help you be reflected back so that you can learn from that. So even the mistakes, the interpersonal relationship mistakes that are made in therapy can become transformative, because like any relationship, there will be errors, there will be misattunements, the client's late for the appointment, or in my case, the practitioner looks away at a point which makes the client feel dropped. That can happen. It can happen. And it happens all the time, but it can be an opportunity as well. If you develop an honest, accepting and loving relationship with yourself via the help and support of a safe other, this is the goal. And it's what I do. And thank you for listening. I hope you find it helpful. Take care.